Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Center for Civil and Human Rights and our Equal Dignity campaign programming. I hope everyone is doing well and that you are comfortable and ready to sit down with us and kind of enjoy an hour of conversation here. Sorry if I'm a little distracted. I just one last thing to do. As just a point of introduction, I just wanted to kind of spend a moment and acknowledge the death of Walter Wallace in Philadelphia. It is unfortunately yet another tragedy that we are going through in the country right now. And I just wanted to give a moment of silence for his family, community, and everyone as a whole. Okay, thank you so much. The program we have for you today is part of a pair. Today, the program is called Modeling Allyship, and we're going to have guests from Equitable Dinners, which is an organization we're working with that has like a civic style dinner regarding issues of allyship. So they're the perfect guests for me to have today. Next week, Friday the 6th, we're going to be in conversation again with a group of folks from an interfaith collective that the center is part of. So it'll be sort of a similar structured event, but with a much different group of panelists. And so we're really trying to give people a variety of ways of looking at allyship. So now I will introduce you to our panelists, and I'm going to start with Nolan Huber, Rhodes. Nolan, if you could introduce yourself. You are actually, there you go.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. Hey, Dr. Jones, didn't get to say hey to you before we got on. It's good to see you. I'm Nolan Huber Rhodes. I use pronouns he, him. I'm really excited to be here today. I get to work alongside the Equitable Dinners team. I am a PhD student at Beulah Heights University, researching the role that digital storytelling plays in disrupting oppressive narratives, and feel like that is a part of my calling to be an ally for anybody who's experiencing any type of oppression, is to tell stories and to echo, to be an echo of people's voices. So that's kind of what brings me here today.
Fantastic. And next up, Lee Osorio. Lee, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Lee Osorio. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Out of Hand Theater. We work at the intersection of art, social justice, and civic engagement. And we use the tools of theater to support community partners. So we work with great people like the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, the King Center, amazing individuals like Camara and Nolan. So our work is really just much like Nolan's work, using storytelling and theater to support the amazing work that people are doing in our community, tear down oppressive structures, and really, in the moment that we're in right now, combat white supremacy and anti-Blackness.
Absolutely. Tara Gay. Tara, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Tara Gay. I am currently the principal and owner for Transformation, Change and Transformation Consulting. I'm the principal transformation consultant for the consulting agency. Much of my work is really building spaces or cultivating spaces in the arena of education and community engagement work, so that you are really talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in a meaningful and authentic way. I'm excited about being a part of today's conversation. I've had the pleasure of working with these folks as a part of the design team for Equitable Dinners. And so I'm very excited about being here today in this conversation.
And Dr. Jones, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Camara Jones, and I'm a family physician, epidemiologist, a past president of the American Public Health Association, and deeply anti-racism activist.
Yes.
And I am delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be part of the design team for the Equitable Dinners Atlanta. effort and to be partnering with the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. And I'm looking forward to this activity today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for rushing over. Dr. Jones was just in another meeting and she was licky split hopping over to this one. So we appreciate
Just in the nick of time.
Yeah. It was excellent. It was absolutely perfect. So we've mentioned Equitable Dinners a bunch of times. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what that is. So Lee, if you would mind giving us just a quick overview of kind of what it is that you guys do.
Sure. So just a very, very brief history. We started with Decatur Dinners, working with both them partners, the Decatur Housing Authority, the City of Decatur Schools, and the City of Decatur's Better Together Board. That came together because Out of Hand and Both Hand partners kind of met and fell in love with each other's work and wanted to create something together, inspired by a Decatur mom who wanted to address the discrepancies in disciplines for students of color in Decatur schools. So we created a one-night dinner. 1,200 people came out. We kind of set a high goal of 1,000 people, and we had a lot more than that show up. We had to have a subsequent set of dinners to accommodate all the people. But the idea is that we bring people together to talk about racial equity, and we launched that with a short piece of art. So that event went so well, we hope to do it in Atlanta. We were going to have 5,000 people come together at 500 different tables, all hearing the same play on Sundays over the month of September. COVID happened, didn't happen, hasn't happened yet, it will. But Adria Kitchens, who is the Equitable Dinners program manager, had this wonderful and brilliant idea to do it virtually. And this team really decided that it was so necessary in this moment, as we were seeing grossly disproportionate deaths from COVID in Black communities in particular, but also Latinx and Indigenous communities as well, that we had to have these conversations. So sorry, I see AJ on here.
Yes,
so
she's saying hi.
Glad you're here. And I let me know what I miss. So Adria Kitchens decided to have work with this team to create a monthly series of dinners. So each month we address racial equity through a different lens. We've done, and I'm gonna certainly forget some of them, so team help me.
That's fine.
But we've done housing, food, health, of course, we started with in April. Camara Jones was our speaker. Economics, voting rights, education, I think I haven't said yet. We've got one community activism coming up, but the
democracy.
Democracy. Yes, thank you. That was October. Thank you. So the structure is we start with a short play, we have a guest speaker, and then we go into breakout rooms to have a facilitated small group conversation. And this team comes up with the questions that we ask in that small group. And then we come together for a closing activity. Oftentimes that's a spoken word poet or some remarks from one of our team members.
Cool. Well, so we've been talking about the idea of having programming around allyship for weeks and months now. It's a really vital topic, and there's a lot of talking going on, a lot of listening going on. And so sometimes it's a little hard to find like where your institution like slots in. And this was an idea that one of my coworkers who has been working directly with you guys thought it would be a cool idea. And it excited me because I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity to model what we'd like to see, because here are a group of people who are involved in creating these conversations. And so I thought it would be awesome to basically use you in your own setting to be a model for how other people can, gain some new ideas, gain a window into where they'd like to be. I mean, I would assume everybody who's on the program with us so far is interested in becoming an ally, is an ally, and is, thinking, am I, doing the best I can, or is there more I could do? So not to put, the bar up too high, but so this is going to be an interesting opportunity for people to actually kind of see allyship happening in the moment, which I think will inform a lot. So we are going to do the same thing and that you guys do, and begin with a piece of theater, which comes to us through a la carte theater, and Nikki Toombs created this piece. Our performer today is going to be Kaya Camp. And so we are going to move into the performance section thusly. So I'm just going to play this film and then she will begin.
change is gonna come. At least that's what we keep telling ourselves. All lives matter. But when? When will they learn that we are a part of all? All lives do matter. And what a world this would be if this were only the truth. But what do we do? I think Paul Laurence Dunbar said it best. We'll just continue to wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes, but what happens when you are tired of the lies? When you are tired of the weight of the world resting on your neck? What do? Who can help? You can help. You can be an ally, not a savior, an ally, one who supports, a champion of preserving humanity for all. That's the moment you say all. Do you know what being an ally is? Well, I can tell you what it's not. It's not pretending to care. It's not a show. It's not to stroke your own ego and make you look like a good person. It's not your voice screaming louder than mine, but wouldn't it be so much better if you actually did care about another human being? About those of us who are fighting constantly to be treated equally and fairly. My life is not a subject for debate. My experience is not a matter of opinion. We can work towards a world where oppression is hypothetical, but until then, don't drown out those who live it. You are the microphone. You are not the one speaking. You are responsible for making other voices heard and understood. And when interest is lost, you turn up the volume and make sure they're paying attention. If you see a closed door, open it. If you see a missed opportunity, create it. And while no invoice could make up for over 400 years of oppression, you can start by opening your purse. You have the power to give back what this stolen land and these stolen lives have passed down to you. Now, you should know when and how to use your body. A body that has privilege because of the color of your skin. Do not walk in front of us, walk beside us and acknowledge that there is an us. But use your privileged body to shield marginalized and oppressed groups when they are in danger of having their voice stolen. Acknowledge your privilege and then use it, because most with it don't know that they have it. Allies listen, they don't demand. Allies don't coddle white guilt, but hold those accountable. Attending a few rallies and having friends attend with you does not make it a choice. Be our ally, be our friend. Don't pretend to care just to say you did your part in the end. Oppression is not an excuse to make you woke. This is real life, okay? Are you willing to help us make that change? I hope so, because with you, I know a change will come. And I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Wow.
All right.
Much.
Amazing job.
Much.
Thank you so much.
So again, thank you to Kaya Camp, Nikki Toombs, and A La Carte Theater. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. So, man, okay. I didn't think it would be so hard to kind of like refocus my thought after that.
I was gonna say, do we just hang it up? Like,
Yeah, I know. Well, so just to kind of like jump into some of the things that the piece made me think when I read it the first time. One of the things that I think is at the very root of understanding allyship is trust, because essentially before anybody can align with anyone, that's what we're talking about, that become a group, have a shared understanding, move forward with shared goals, there has to be a type of trust that you understand each other and that common ground exists. So I just wondered if that's a concern that, or a thought that other people think about. I'll just pick, like, Lee, is that something that tracks for you, that you think trust is a part of becoming a good ally?
That is such a loaded word. Listen, I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy for since I was 5, trying to work on my trust issues. Trust is a loaded word.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of times that I hear allies or, people who are trying to be allies talk about that word, they talk about, we got to rebuild trust. We just got to rebuild trust. It's never existed.
Right.
It's never existed. We're not rebuilding anything. We have never had trust in this country. And so we gotta think outside the box. We can't anything because we have to imagine a new future. So, I think that word absolutely is something that we think about a lot. And it's not building trust is, it takes time, and it takes proximity, and it takes failure, and it takes forgiveness, and it takes a lot of things that we have to practice before we can earn that word. And I have seen that in this group. We challenge each other, and we hang together, and we fail, and we say the wrong thing, and we call each other out, and we are starting to maybe get on the road to build trust in this group, which is one of the things I think is beautiful about the behind the scenes of the Equitable Dinners.
Tara, I see you kind of making some nods there while he was speaking. That was a pretty bold statement Lee made. Does that do something to you?
Well, certainly, and Lee knows he always has the ability to move me to something in terms of our conversation. So I love that we are in conversation. I think trust is a muscle that has to be built, and it is and exercised. It is not something, if you are someone, I look at The Rock and I say, sometimes when I look at his Instagram, he's still lifting weights, and I say to myself, my God, what else is he going to build? But it is also sustaining what you've built. And so it's not just a matter of you arrive at it and then you're done. So it is one of those things that it is a muscle that has to be built, and it is one that has to be utilized on a regular basis, or it will be like anything else, like a muscle will go into atrophy. And so you have this thing that is deformed or whatever as a result of you not continuing to build on it. And I think, to some of the things that were highlighted in what Kaya shared with us is allyship can't be something that feels performative or transactional. And I think a lot of times that is what it seems for a lot of people, which is where the lack of trust comes in. The fact that we would even have to name it an ally rather than just a human being, because humanity should call on us to do things when we recognize the humanity of other human beings is not actually being recognized and being preserved. And so to me, the fact that it even needs a name is what I think sometimes leads to a lack of trust, because if I just honor you as another human being, I don't need to call you anything else but a human being, and know that I can trust that you see me as a full human being who has the same rights to a full life that you have granted for yourself. And so that is, I think for our group, we are also ones that are constantly challenging language that we believe sometimes codifies these ideas of racism, and people not even understanding how the word in itself leads to other divisions versus then building bridges. And so I'll certainly make space for my colleagues to jump in, but definitely.
Dr. Jones is jumping. So
I am jumping. Thank you, Tara Gay. Thank you, Tara Gay. And thank you, Lee. And thank you, all of you, David. So anytime I see somebody trying to frame something as being about allyship, I was like, that's a bit of a loose relationship, as you said, Tara. If I'm an ally, but my vacation is coming up, I might say to you, well, check you in 2 weeks, hope the struggle goes well. Oh no, this is our struggle. So I don't even like the term ally, even though a lot of people can understand that. I don't like it. I say maybe compatriot. I love what you said, co-human being, family, something like that. And it's because even though our experiences are different because of racism, which is this system. So I'm going to give you my definition of racism to say where I'm going with this. That racism is a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on so-called race, based on the social interpretation of how one looks in this race conscious society, it has three impacts. Yes, it unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities. Yes, every unfair disadvantage has its reciprocal unfair. Every unfair disadvantage has its reciprocal unfair advantage. So it unfairly advantages others. So disadvantage, advantage. But the key part that we need to lift up is that racism is sapping the strength of the whole society through the waste of human resources. And so if we were to lift that message up and people to understand that even though their individual or community relationship to this system is one that is being advantaged, the air we breathe, the system we breathe, the waste of human potential, the division that racism is engendering and supporting and stoking, that is something that is sapping the strength of the whole society. So it's not that I'm going to be an ally to your struggle. This is our struggle. I think that's the key point. And then if I understand that this is our struggle, I'll know, as in the play, I'll know how to use the voice. My ally or compatriot, I would say, co-conspirator voice will never drown out your voice, because perhaps I will use my voice in a different space. Instead of coming to your community and trying to be the one at the head of the demonstration, no, I need to go to my boardroom. Right. Or I need to go to my church or my family dinner and use my voice there. And so it even, if I think I'm allied with your struggle, then I'm going to try to glom on and maybe sometimes overshadow or lead your struggle. But if this is our struggle, then I'm going to try to figure out what is my place in our struggle to use my privilege and all to the best advantage. I loved the line in there about using my privileged body to shield others. That was, I wrote down like about 5 things.
I also love that we're 20 minutes in and we've already stripped the title. This is great.
It's great. It's great.
Another title to strip, though. Another title that challenge us to strip is this idea and this notion of privilege. Access to racism shouldn't be a privilege. We need to be talking about whether you are consciously or unconsciously benefiting from racism and whether you are complicit in racist ideologies that perpetuate systems of racism. If we stop calling it a privilege, perhaps people will be willing to give it up faster than they have, because we keep qualifying it as a privilege to have advantages based on racism and racist ideologies.
Oh, Tara, hold on one sec there. I want to give that one to Nolan, because that first nugget at the beginning, what you said, I feel like that's so important. I want to get him in here. So what does that say to you?
Wait, quickly. I have to go to another meeting,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
It was so amazing to meet all of you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And I really love this discussion. It's so, I wish I could stay, but thank you again so much for having me. It was great meeting you all.
Thank
you so much for joining us. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Tara, if you could just say that first sentence one more time, just so we're all clear on where we just were.
David, I can never say it the same, but the gist but truly the gist of it is we really need to push ourselves beyond this terminology of privilege. We need to really call it out for what it is. And it has been people who have either been conscious, unconscious, or complicit in racism and been benefactors of racism and racist ideologies. And if we were to qualify it as such, I do think that we would have more people who are looking at how do I give up my access to racism, because it does not benefit the society, as Dr. Jones talks about. The whole of humanity is actually challenged if I don't give this up. So there are no benefits. There are no
access to racism. That's the phrase.
And we have to shift from thinking racism is a privilege. It should not be a privilege.
It should not be. That's right. I mean, I love the way that you framed that, the way that I think about it as someone who does have significant access to racism and has benefited in countless ways from racism. The way that a lot of the ways that I think about it is, kind of reframing the idea of using privilege. I think that we can leverage our access to the racist structures to dismantle them. And I think we can divest ourselves from the benefits that come along with it. And so I think that as a white person, as a white male, specifically in this, that I have one of my questions that I always have to ask myself is where does this intersect with my self-interests?
Mm-hmm.
And am I doing anything as a part of my quote unquote allyship that actually really is in some way preserving or giving me what I want and benefiting my personal self-interests? And I think what Dr. Jones said really stuck with me in relation to this is that I think that's the only way it can become our struggle.
Right.
Is if we are willing to be able to say, what's my self-interest here? Am I willing to divest myself of the access to those self-interests because of the racist structures that exist?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I come alongside other people in this fight as I divest myself of that access and or leverage that access to dismantle it? And so I think we have to learn how to discern between the two. There are situations where we leverage it to dismantle, and there are also situations where we say, I need to divest myself of my access here because it's really only benefiting me.
I'm interested in something that you said about challenging that notion of using privilege, and then you've broken it down into those component pieces. I think that's really interesting because I've always had an issue with that idea. I just the sheer sound of it doesn't track for me, and I think you might have gotten at some of that core tacked on to what Tara said, like the way that she described racism. And Lee, I see you nodding. Is this doing something for you that we should get into?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what I think about is I hear sometimes in talks about allyship, like I'm going to use my privilege. That's a phrase that like, I'm going to, we don't have any Black people at my workplace, or we don't have any Black people in my church, but I'm going to go in there and I'm going to speak for, and there's a way in which, instead of like creating space at your workplace or creating new jobs or stepping down from your job or like, working on policies, I feel like there's like a white savior attitude that can come into that. And the way that I think about what Nolan said is in terms of comfort, right? In terms of our self-interest, I think of that as comfort. And that's a good metric of like, if you're working in your self-interest or not. Like, if you're comfortable, you're probably still working in your self-interest. I love that Tara used this metaphor of building muscle, right? And I think of, we right now, I think a lot of people are in training, right? Where there's a lot of anti-racist trainings going on. There's a lot of like workplace dialogue going on. And I think about going to the gym. And if you leave the gym and you're not sore, you haven't done the work. If you leave the gym and you're still comfortable, you haven't done the work. And so I think a lot about like, how do we, Diani Rodriguez said this last night, another theater maker and activist in town. Basically, she said, and I'm paraphrasing her beautiful phrasing, but like, if you are comfortable, you're not doing the work. And I really landed with me.
Yeah.
May I jump in?
Yeah, sure, please do. Please do.
So I agree with that, because I used to, even when I was talking, try to make white people feel a little more comfortable. I used to say, if you feel uncomfortable when I talk about, unearned white privilege is how I was talking about at the time or whatever, then I used to say, shake it off, stay with me, I'll tell you more stories. And now I say, no, if you feel uncomfortable, you need to lean in, because the edge of our comfort for all of us is our growing edge. So I really appreciate that, all of those analogies, but I want to push back a little bit on something. And I'm growing right now, so I don't exactly have the end, but I'm going to tell you a way that I have tried to talk to people about using what I describe as white skin privilege, because I think the white skin does privilege people in this society right now in the US. I think that the white skin gives people the benefit of the doubt, high expectations. If you're running through a neighborhood while white, you're jogging or running towards something. If you're running through a neighborhood while Black, then you're running from something, you've just done a job. So the white skinness does do something. And I often share this story of, so you guys might remember 6 years ago in McKinney, Texas, outside of Dallas, there was a group of young 12 and 13-year-olds. One of them's birthday was going to be celebrated. They were going to go to a pool in one of their neighborhoods. They went. The people at the pool objected to them being there, called the police. And what we first saw as people was images of a police officer, a white male police officer dragging a young Black girl by her hair, and then he sat on her. And then we saw the young Black boys with their hands cuffed behind their back, sitting on the curb. And so when I saw that, I was like, and I asked people like, how do we know about this, right? And people were like, well, social media. But the answer was, I learned the next day when I saw a young white boy on TV news saying, it's almost as if I were invisible to the police. This young white boy was part of the friend group. He saw what was happening to his friends. He could have run home for safety, but recognizing that his white skin made him almost invisible to the police, he stood up there and he videotaped what was happening for amplifying the voices in the play, being the microphone for documenting or whatever. And that is a role that he could do because the white skin made him almost invisible to the police. So in that way, I don't want to discard the notion of recognizing your white skin privilege and then using it. And maybe we don't have to call it white skin privilege, but in this society, that white skin does convey things like safety and high expectations and benefit of the doubt and all kinds of, more interest in your voice, giving credit, if somebody says, if I say something and then a white person says it, they were the one who said it, so the white skin does give people those things in this society. And so to recognize that you have those things in your toolbox and then figure out, how do I use those tools for our struggle? I guess that's how I'm going to come down to it. We don't have to call it privilege. Let's call them tools. And that the white skin is a tool that people who are living as white in this country have in their toolbox, and they need to figure out they have this toolbox with these tools, and then how do they use them best? And it's not to get in front of me, it's to go over in the other place and start building something there.
Tara, I feel like
absolutely.
Yeah, for me, it is the continuation of understanding that whiteness gives you access, acceptance, and resources. And that is what I'm saying, understanding that the benefits of being a white person and the structures of racism as they exist, you may not have created them, but being conscious of how they work and understanding that until we dismantle them, they still give you advantages, which will give you access, acceptance, and resources that are not going to be available to other people because they do not have that same whiteness of skin. And so again, that's the part for me that becomes important. I also want to expand it and say, I also recognize it is not just about, because here's the other thing, I don't want people to feel that the only people who have the power, if we are going to use the term allyship, are white people. They are not the only people empowered to have the ability to have access, acceptance, and resources. As a Black female, I have friends who are a part of the LGBTQ community that I have access to certain things because people identify me as a heterosexual female, and there are things that they don't have access to. So I have the ability to support my friends in ways that they are not currently accepted and or supported based on people's understanding of whatever that is around their sexual orientation. And so again, I also want to just expand for us that the ability, this is why I say recognizing humanity versus myself calling myself an ally, allows me to understand I have the ability to show up in many different spaces and recognize the humanity of other people. And when it is being denied, understanding what do I have access to do and what do I have in terms of acceptance of other people who are beyond this circle, and what do I have resources to do to amplify what their needs are and to be able to address their needs as they have articulated to me, not as I have identified or have decided should be their needs. That's the other part, that when someone asked the question earlier, how is that trust going to be built? That trust is going to be built because you allow the space for you to get quiet, to hear from someone who does not have what they need to have to articulate what that is. Even if I don't agree that that's the priority of what your need is, I don't need to change your priorities if I'm the person who's asked you, how can I be of service? Not of saviorship, but how can I be of service to you in any capacity allows me to then say, independent of what you identify at the end of that sentence, I must act in a way that allows you to understand fully, I heard what you said. I am now moving in a way that will support you and being of service to you to meet that particular need. That is how that trust is going to actually be built. I look at the Me Too movement and I look at how we start with the understanding of where that conversation started, and then it got co-opted by other people who did not even understand. In the midst of the co-opting, you have now moved people, and it's not about that I become a person that is the voice for the voiceless. I've actually stripped you of the microphone. Part of the job is for me to actually pass the mic, not to actually decide that I need to be the person at the mic. So that's the important part that we're talking about when you're saying about building the trust. Because again, I think that there's accountability across communities that we have with a number of issues. But if we prioritize at this point in history racial equity, then we certainly will then be asking all of those who are outside the scope of communities of color that have access to greater advantages due to a system of racism. That's what we're asking you to do, to now move into a place. And I think, Leah, you and I had a question, or people vacillating now, what does this actually mean? People are not asking you to move out. They're asking you to move over. And that is where you need to understand, let them tell you, it is just like a director in a play. Since we have all these great artists here, they will mark the stage as to where they want you to stand based on what the play and the scene calls for. That's the same thing. Allow Black people to serve as your directors. We will let X mark the spot of where you need to stand in position in supporting us.
You know, I want to, first of all, 100% on everything you just said.
I'm saying amen. Amen.
For real though, like a lot of stuff to unpack there, and I'm gonna hold on to some of it because you're already like into some of my later questions. But one thing, like just relating back to my thesis about this conversation, there are some things that have been plucked out here that I really want to draw to people's attention. First of all, from right off the rip, from what Lee said, from what Tara said, from what Camara said, what Nolan said, there's a lot of direct, honest I statements going on here. So people are making their points from their perspective, and then they're hearing responses to their point from someone else's perspective. There isn't a presumption of connection to something else or some larger group. They're saying, I am interested in this. I feel this. This is important to me. Terms. We've talked a good amount about that. I mean, at different points, you know, there were really specific things, the way Tara talked about race, the way that Nolan broke down the concept of privilege, the way Dr. Jones got into
Camara.
Camara got into allyship. I think defining those things and working through those definitions is essential to being able to get into the nitty gritty of this type of conversation. So there's just a couple of things that I wanted to kind of to point out in relation to the whole conversation so far. Nolan, you literally don't have to raise your hand, but you did. So.
You're good. Oh, I just wanted to make sure, because in case you weren't done, I didn't want to go in. I also, in the spirit of that, I don't want to stick on this for too long because I don't think it's the biggest point. But I did want to make sure that we talked about that in regard to trust, because I don't want to over conflate the role that trust plays. So I think that trust is necessary. Mm-hmm. I think that building trust is absolutely a direction that we should be going in, but trust is not the goal. the ultimate end goal. It is a tool that can help us,
right,
as we work together. Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up is because I am in relationship, partnership, allyship with people who I will never fully have their full trust.
Right.
And I think that as a white male cisgender heterosexual person, I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
I have to be okay with the fact that I'm likely going to miss something, and I can cause harm, and that may mean that the fullness of trust can never truly be built. It doesn't mean that it's not important. It doesn't mean that it's not a helpful tool. It's just a realization that especially as white people, we don't give up just because we're like, well, they don't trust me. They're never going to trust me, because
That's important.
it is the freedom of Black people is why we are in this, right? And so I think that
and the freedom of all of us.
Okay with that. Yeah,
not
absolutely.
to overtalk you, but trust, like if we're going toward trust, then we're missing the point of dismantling systems.
Right.
Trust is built in the work.
Right.
Trust is built when you said you're going to be next to me at noon to take these bricks down, and you're there. As opposed to having been before me and taking the bricks and rearranged them some kind of other way, or not showing and, oh, you forgot, or whatever. So trust is a byproduct of working together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I agree with you, Nolan, it's not the goal, but you can tell if the work together is actually working together by whether trust is accruing.
Right.
I would say, so maybe we should say that trust is not the goal, but it's an indicator.
Right. Well, I would also like to say too about that I think an essential part of his point is that the work and the striving is the purpose, and that a perfect union is not a goal. It's not something that people should be concerned about. It's in the striving, it's in the working, it's in the listening, it's in the connecting that we will build this thing, allyship or comradeship, however we want to explain it. But I think that's a really important point.
But what did you say, David? You just said a thing that made me have a question. You said, can you remember what you just said?
Basically, I was just trying to say, I was trying to draw attention towards the point that what Nolan was saying is that that a perfect trust, a perfect union, I think, of people of different backgrounds or different faiths, different experiences, is not the point. That we shouldn't be interrupted.
What do you mean by that? Yeah, so what do you mean by that? I'd like to explore that more, like who even thought that, or who thinks that?
Well, I think I bring it up because I think a lot of people allow themselves to be stopped for fear that there's a goal in which they won't achieve. And so I think the thing I heard in what he was saying was that the fear of failure is not something to be focused on, that the obsession with a top line goal is not to be concerned about, but to be focused on the work. Does that make sense, Nolan? Am I making that point?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And the ultimate point that I'm trying to make is that if trust is my goal, if Nolan being trusted is the goal, then I'm centering myself. And if I'm out because I don't feel trusted, then I was in it for myself. Right. And that's really the main point that I'm trying to make.
Right. Is that true? Do you think a lot of white people are feeling like that? Okay, and Lee, I saw you about to answer too. I mean, do you think a lot of people are in it so that they can be your friend or be trusted or be seen as woke?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's part of the performative allyship, piece that was in the play, right? It was I think a very powerful part of the play where, and I'm not saying there's no value in the mass of people who were in the streets. And in a lot of ways, some people were doing it performatively, but you know what, showing up is a part of it. I just think that it's easy to, if we don't build beyond that, then, and we don't start to challenge our self-interests and what we're trying to get out of something, then we can only go so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that gets into sorry.
Before you say something, I'd like to bring up another thing that will allow you to talk about this same concept. Could you talk a little bit about the microphone statement from the play? You are the microphone, you are not the one speaking. Does that connect to where you were just going to go?
Yeah, I can make it connect.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that came back up.
Yeah, I know, and I love that line. I wrote that line. I was with Camara writing notes from the play. I think all of this gets to the point of like finish line allyship, right? And we've talked about performative allyship, but E.B. Owolabi, another theater maker in town, I heard her use this phrase first of like, once I do this, then I'm done. Or like, I'm doing this to be seen as one of the good ones. I'm not one of the bad ones. I, couldn't perform racist behavior. I'm, fighting racist systems without truly being aware of what racist systems are or how I am complicit in them. And so how do we become the microphone? How do we not become the voice? How do we not think that we're done? And to sort of your earlier point, how I think there's a lot of performance of, I know the right words, I know the language, I know, I know BIPOC, but like language is always changing. There are a lot of people that don't like BIPOC. That's part of the mess of it. So I think in order to be the microphone, you have to be in the mess. You have to be in relationship with people. You have to be failing. You have to be, we have to get rid, to Nolan's point, of this idea of perfection, or, what you were saying, David, of this idea of like this perfect union, this world that's going to exist. Perfection is a tool of white supremacy. It makes it seem like there's this, once we get here, we'll know that we're done. And I mean, it's a question that I have a lot, like, how will we know when we have arrived? And is there an arrival in this work? And how do we grow comfortable with the non-closure and the constant work? How do we embrace that, truly embrace that, and stop trying to get to the finish line, because the finish line we can't even imagine.
Can I just offer one thing before you get to describing? I was
coming back to about the mess. I feel like that's a
yes. The mess is that, again, when we keep using this metaphor of the mic, the reality is that you don't actually have a place on stage. You should actually be in the audience, enjoying what someone else is describing to you as the experience, and actually learning from the lived experiences from other people. That's the challenge that people are having right now, because part of it is in the idea that you keep, and I happen to just personally hate the terminology, the terminology woke, because what I find is most people who think they're woke are actually just sleepwalking. So you're in motion, but you're still asleep. It doesn't make you awake. And so if you are awake, there are certain things that you understand, that there are places that I actually don't have a position on. I actually have to step out of the way and allow other people whose lived experience this is to actually be the only people who have the microphone. This isn't about sharing the stage. This is about sharing your microphone. This is not even about sharing, like, for some people who may understand this reference, where people plug in because their power has been turned off, but they're using the neighbor, they're ciphering electricity from the neighbor. That's where you have to consider yourself, that you simply are providing the resource for the neighbor to plug in their own microphone. They're not asking you for your mic. They just need access to the electricity so that they can be amplified and their own voices can tell their own story, because it is their lived experience. And that's where, if you want to know how it's working, that's when you know it's working, that it is not a requirement that I even have to consider your space in this, because you have made enough space for me to know that it is perfectly okay for me to be the one who articulates my story, because it is my lived experience. It is not about whether or not you can mimic my voice. It is not whether or not you actually have the ability to act like I do. It is understanding you cannot even be cast for this role. Some things require certain things in order for you to even be considered for the role. You don't have those things. That's just the reality of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. People who are in theater, who are in movies or whatever, can clearly understand that if you called for me today and the role called for a 98-year-old white Jewish man, I can show up. I could even take on characteristics that I may believe belong to that person's character. But the reality is I should not be showing up for that audition, because respectfully, somebody else should be in that role who actually has that lived experience. That's not me. And that's the part that I think, if we get to the part of, in terms of what it looks like, it is the authentic relationships that are constantly with the push and pull that I am learning as I am also giving information. It's the reciprocity of humanity that is the relationships that you build. When you are in relationships with other people, you do not ask them on a daily basis, are you trusting me? Can you give me a gold star because I've proven that I can be trustworthy? No, you just keep building the relationship, and trust happens over time, and you act accordingly because trust is actually there. You can violate trust, you may lose trust, whatever that is, but when you understand the core of that human being is still a good person, you figure out how to even get beyond the moment when trust was broken. That's where we are and where we should be working towards in terms of our relationships with one another, not our allyship. What are our authentic relationships that we are actually building?
Again, we have totally shredded that term, and I love it. Camara, you were going to say something. I really
was. Well, Tara just said, like, whoa. Tara just laid it down and mapped it out. She built it up and all. But I do want to, I just have a little bit more, because I was also responding to the notion of Mike, but I liked what you said, Tara, about you're not even supposed to be on the stage. And I was going to say, and there are lots of ways to be tools or to reach into your toolbox. And so it's not just the mic, and it's building up the stage, if you will, or it's, as you said, listening. So I just wanted to, I was also pushing back against that, even though I wrote down the notion of be the mic, that was a good image at first. But I really appreciated, Tara, how you blasted it and expanded on it. The thing that I got so excited about was, how will we know when we have made it? This is my, and you guys can expand on this or push back on this. This is my idea right now. We will know that we have made it when the term disadvantaged child will have no meaning, because we will not be able to imagine any child being born into disadvantage or finding themselves falling into disadvantage. So that is, I think, how we will know. And that's not even a racialized understanding of how we will know. That is how we will know. Because then we'll know, we'll get there by recognizing that there's no such thing as my children versus your children, or my tribe's children versus your tribe's children, that all children are our children. And when we act on that knowledge, then we will build a world and take down the barriers that are currently keeping us from that world, build a world where there'll be no such thing as a disadvantaged in any kind of way child. That's when we will have made it.
Is that your answer, Natalie?
I like that. Yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about children and the focus on children and sort of, I know Camara brings up the Native American idea of living for 7 generations, right? Like, how are we planting seeds right now for generations that will come long, long, long after we're dead? And I think that's a really beautiful articulation of how we will know. So I'm taking that, as I have taken so many things from Camara.
Well,
can I just offer one other thing?
Yeah,
the other
sure.
way you will know is that we are compensated in the same way that you've been compensating yourselves.
Okay.
So again, part of the way that I can dismantle those disadvantages is I can actually pay for things that I can't currently pay for. And so it is, again, when we think about this idea of building these relationships, if you are seeking to figure out how you get into a relationship with other people who are perhaps Black people, and I'll speak from my lived experience as a Black woman, then look to figure out, how do you pay me well? Because guess what has happened up until this point? I have not been compensated at the same rate in which you have valued yourself. And so sometimes I don't need your trust. I may need your trust fund. I am not looking for
man, just the t-shirts.
I want to know that when you see me, you not only value my relationship, but you also value my time and my experiences, and you are willing to compensate me for that. And I think that is key to this conversation when we talk about building this, because we have a lot of people who want to be allies, but at no cost to the things that they have already gained as a result of systemic racism. And we have to be willing to understand and have that conversation, which I know is one that can be challenging.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm always impressed by with these programs is when I feel the sense that I need 2 hours. So, so we are definitely at that point where I know I need, but do not have 2 hours. My boss will be very unhappy, though I would love to have the whole conversation for the next 65 minutes. But so there isn't, to Nolan's earlier point, we're not going to reach an end until Lee and Camara as well. We're not coming to an end. We're just stopping. So let's find a graceful way to stop. Perhaps we could talk just briefly about the experience of Equitable Dinners from your perspective as designers. Like, I would like for every person who's on this program, if they have not participated, to come in. So perhaps maybe you guys could all just like quickly kind of talk about like what has been great about that and why these people should get in and be involved.
I'll start because I think I may have been one of the, I don't know when different people came in, but I came in sort of later. The reason that I'm still in, I came in first invited as a speaker, and then I stayed, and I made space for myself at the table, honestly, because I was loving what they were about. And so it's the combination, it's recognizing the power of art and the power of conversation and the power of being in presence honestly with one another. So I just have loved that. And the kinds of conversations that we have on the design team are like this, as well as the conversations that happen when we have our monthly dinners on the third Sunday, usually of every month from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. Just as a little plug. So it's the art, so the commissioning of art, the delivery of the art, then having a speaker to bring some crystallized points on a particular topic, and then just opening it up in facilitated conversations. It's not even just, okay, you 5 people, you 10 people are in the same room together, just talk, but facilitated conversation, which makes it even feel more doable. So I just love the whole thing about it.
Fantastic. Who's next?
I'll go off of that especially with the facilitators, Camara. I think the facilitators also help make it safe. I've seen conversations go so poorly before, and I think the facilitators help make it safe. But I guess my experience with it comes from my faith background. I believe that there is something sacred, something human about gathering around the table, even if it's virtual, and the idea that we are being nourished. And I love that the idea is that we are creating a nourishing space for racial equity. That's our goal. And so the idea that we're coming together and sharing in something that's already so common, and that is just eating food. And we are being nourished together and trying to create a nurturing space for racial equity. I think that that's so important, that we can come to the table and do that and make it safe to have those discussions with the facilitated conversation. I also want to say that I think our hope is that it's a catalyst. I think sometimes it can get conflated with the goal is to come together and eat and sing Kumbaya and go home. And that's not the goal. It is meant to be a catalyst. It's meant to be a first step. And we think that it's something that we can provide as a first step.
Lee, and then I'm going to end with Sarah.
That's good, because she's amazing and will be great final note.
I know what I'm doing here. Yeah, this is going to work.
Exactly. I think my pitch for it has a lot to do with what Tara was saying about pay people. There's a cost to coming to the dinner. It's free, but there is a cost. It costs your time. It costs your vulnerability. It costs you actually owning your complicity in some of the systems that we are talking about. There's a cost, but what you get, and to sort of Camara's point and definition of racism, what you get in return when we break down these systems of oppression, we all gain. And so, as I'm thinking about, back to the idea of what an accomplice or an ally or a co-conspirator actually is, you know, it's someone who's willing to pay the cost because they know that there's such a bigger, there's much more wealth waiting for all of us. So I hope that you will all be willing to find your way to pay into this work.
And Tara?
For me, I think what the dinners offer is an opportunity for us, and certainly being a person who has been a teacher, I think you owe it to any student to provide the foundations for them to build skills on. And I think what we offer through the dinners is an opportunity for people to get information that helps them to build the foundation of understanding what first are inequitable scenarios, and then how then do we, and what work is required for us to get to greater equity around those particular things. And so for me, that's really what the Equitable Dinners served, is certainly all the things that my colleagues have said here in terms of being a catalyst, but it is also foundational. I don't have an expectation if I have a student to get to quantum physics if I have not provided them the foundations of just the simple mathematics. And so some of these things just for some people literally have not added up. And so we are providing for them what X is represented. We are giving them what Y is represented. We're showing the intersections and the slopes and where the things that have intersected in our lives. And so I do think that that is what we are attempting to do with Equitable Dinners. And we actually do it first for ourselves. We don't go about it assuming that we have somehow a magic sauce that we're providing for people during these meals. That is why we have these discussions as a group. Each time we prepare for a new dinner, we have these kind of conversations with each other around what do we think are the important questions for us to ask during the facilitated conversations? What do we hope people maybe have as takeaways? And we also don't leave it from the space that we are only providing as opposed to also being recipients. We go into the space being facilitators, but we also are open to what do we learn from people that we have not met. And so I do think that that's the important thing, that we model what we hope to be building for other people, which is the capacity to have conversations around things that you may not have to be an expert in, but you are willing to learn and become more knowledgeable about things that you do not have as your level of expertise yet. And so that's really what I hope we are able to provide for people. And even I hope today's conversation model for them how we do that. There are things and nuggets that, as you've seen, we've heard from one thing say, oh, I challenge that because that's not what I necessarily. So it's that same idea of how we approach even every time, literally every time this design team goes into those meetings of deciding what it will look like. This is the process for us. And so if you are up for this kind of process of moving yourself and being inspired by incredible people that you've seen like here today, I think that is what you will gain from coming to the dinners. If you're bold enough, then you even sign up to become a facilitator for the dinners. If you're wild enough, you'll become a part of the design team. So
I love it.
Welcome it all.
Well, thank you so much to the four of you for coming on to be a part of this with me. I'll admit that having this program has been really important to me. And so it's really, when I say we've been working on it, it's been me digging around trying to figure it out. So thank you so much for coming to be a part of this. Thank you to Equitable Dinners in general for partnering with the center. Thank you to Kea Camp and Nikki Toombs and a la carte theater for bringing us this wonderful theater presentation. Certainly sign up for Equitable Dinners. Join us for the Modeling Allyship Interfaith Response to White Supremacy program next Friday. Like I said, similar build, different people, though I wish I could just have you all back because it was so much fun. But yeah, so happy Friday. Please enjoy it. Again, thank you all so much. And have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much. This was great.
David in the center.